Why hello friends, Jen Foxbot here. Welcome to another edition of Math Mondays. Yeah! Okay, so in this episode we're going to talk about polynomials and the quadratic equation. Yeah, quadratic equation! I use that so many times. And so like most of these algebra videos, it's going to get a little bit long, so I'm going to divide the video into two chunks, A and B. In the first chunk, we're going to talk about simplifying polynomials and factoring. And then the second part, we're going to talk about how do you solve a polynomial, specifically using the quadratic equation, and I'll briefly mention graphing polynomials. So cool, let's get started. First of all, what is a polynomial? A polynomial is an equation or an expression made up of many different monomials. And you're like, wait, what the heck is a monomial? That's lame. You can't use another term like that. Well, my Latin expert friends will point out that poly means many and mono means one. And so a polynomial is many monomials, and a monomial is a number with exponents that are integers, that are positive integers. And so a number, a regular old number like 4 is a monomial because you can imagine a positive 1. 4 to the 1 is 4. Another type of monomial are variables with positive integer exponents. So you can have things like 4x cubed, etc. Y'all get the point, hopefully. Things that are not monomials are things like x to the 2/3. Or 5 over y, which would be 5 times y to the -1. So that's a negative, not a monomial. So we'll come to these later, I am sure, if y'all are curious, because these terms do exist in the math and the real world, so we can't pretend like they don't exist. But this video, we're going to be focusing on polynomials made up of terms with positive integer or whole number exponents. And just like in all of algebra, a lot of what we're going to be doing with polynomials is simplifying. When we are simplifying polynomials, we have to make sure that we keep the information in the expression intact. What I mean by that is that we are only combining terms with other like terms. So let's look at a simple example. Let's say we have x squared plus 4x plus 4 plus 2x squared plus 4x plus 1. I got a little tight at the end there. Okay, so when we are adding, we have to be very careful that we are only adding like terms together. So one of my teachers told me underlining terms can help. So I use different types of underlining techniques for the different types of terms. So one term has an x squared, another term has a single x, and the last type of term is just a regular old number. Oh, sorry for the blurriness. Okay, so in this case we have an x squared plus a 2x squared, which is going to give us 3x squared. Then we have a 4x plus 4x. 4 plus 4 is 8x. And then we have a 4 plus a 1, which is 5. So that's what we would do if we were to simplify the addition of these two polynomials. What if this was a minus sign? That's okay, don't worry. We do the exact same thing, we just flipped the sign on the second polynomial. Okay, so then in this case, we would do x squared minus 2x squared. And remember, we have a 1 in front of this first term, so it would be 1 minus 2, which is minus 1 or minus x squared. Then we have a 4x minus 4x, which is 0. Woo, our life is easy. And then we have a 4 minus 1, which is a positive 3. So when we simplify this with a negative sign, we get minus x squared plus 3. Again, we're only combining like terms with other like terms. So that's what we got to do to maintain information when we're adding and subtracting. Now let's look at something a little more complicated. Let's look at multiplying polynomials. Yeah! So let's say we have x plus 2 times x plus 3 with a little dot in the middle to symbolize multiplication. I had a teacher tell me the technique of FOIL one time, and it's super handy. I think it's still used. And FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. It's a procedure to multiply the terms in a polynomial with a second polynomial. And so let's run through that. So basically, first means you multiply the first two terms together. So that's going to give me an x squared. X times x is x squared. Then we do the outer terms, so the outer of the first one and the outer of the last one, which gives me 3 times x, which is 3x. Then we do the inner terms, 2 times x, which is 2x. And then the last terms, 2 times 3 is 6. And just like we did earlier, we simplify by combining like terms to get x squared plus 5x plus 6. Not so bad, right? So you can imagine this gets a little more tedious when we have more terms, but it becomes, we just do the same exact thing. When we're multiplying polynomials together, we use the distributive property, which basically says that we have to multiply all of the terms together so that it's all adequately mixed. So let's say we have x squared plus 2x plus 1 times x plus 2. We'll walk through this, and then I'll give you an example to try on your own. So in this case, personally, I like to start in the first polynomial and work my way right. So I take the first term and I distribute it to all of the terms in the second polynomial. This case we'll only have 2, so it's not too bad. So x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 2 is 2x squared. Then we can move on to the middle term. So 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 2 is 4x. And finally, the last term, our little 1 hanging out at the end there, we get 1 times x, which is just x, and 1 times 2, which is 2. And then now we can simplify our whole equation, again, by combining like terms. So we get x cubed plus 4x squared plus 5x plus 2. There we go. So you'll notice in the last example when we had x plus 3 times x plus 2, we ended up with a polynomial that had 3 terms in it. And now this polynomial has 4 terms in it. So it makes sense because we have an extra term in this first starting equation. There's actually a pattern here, so do more examples and you'll start to see it. So I have a challenge for you to wrap up this first part. Let me click on the video screen to make it less blurry. Okay, so your challenge is to multiply together and simplify this equation. 2x squared plus 4x plus 3 times x plus 1. So go ahead and multiply those together and let me know what you get. Okay, so now the rest of the discussion will be centered on solving polynomial equations. I'm going to change my mind and move factoring to this second video because factoring actually has to do with solving polynomial equations. And I will end part 1 by generally saying we have to learn how to simplify polynomials so that we can manipulate them and more easily solve them for different things. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions on that. And now check out part 2. Yeah!